Hey, everybody. Welcome to Wealth is a Team Sport Live. For those of you who are new, I'm glad to have you here. We are going to have an awesome guest today, Marisa. I'm going to get to her bio in just a minute. But for those of you who are new tuning in, I think one of the most valuable gifts that you can give yourself is peace of mind by learning from other people, thinking bigger thoughts. I totally believe that life is hard enough. So anytime you can get a pearl of wisdom from an expert, that's kind of what this show is all about. And, I have a lot of people that kind of say, well, why is a financial advisor having this kind of a show and these kind of interviews? And it's kind of a lot of different answers. But one of the things I know for my business, and I think for just life, it's all about relationships and building trust. And you can't just go, hey, trust me. You have to actually have conversations. You have to share a little bit of yourself and kind of where your values and your background is. So that's why I like to do these shows. And I just get to interview all these fabulous people. And then from the financial perspective, no matter what we're doing in life, for good or bad, you need money to do things. So everybody always has some kind of an intersection that's just a natural fit or a great anecdote to share that has to do with money. So all of these things come together and make for a really fun show. So let me go ahead and introduce you to Marisa, and then we can just get into all of her good stuff that she's going to share with us today. So Marisa Jones is a teacher, community builder, and mindset coach. After leading a successful career as an architect and a strategic advisor leading global multi-million-dollar technology projects, she published her memoir, The Lotus Tattoo, One Woman's Grit from Bully to Redemption in 2019. And now she focuses on helping women balance mental health challenges with career success. We're going to dig into that a little bit for sure. Marisa's signature program is for those seeking to find their purpose and authenticity in life. A 6-month intensive bootcamp, Mindset Warrior, The Art of Intentional Thinking, focuses on healing the long-term effects of trauma and the behaviors, patterns, and decisions we make stemming from our childhood imprint. So welcome to the show, Marisa.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, excellent. So, after, just learning this a little bit about your background, you have this experience like across this full spectrum of life from technology to being a mindset coach. It's like you have the soft and the hard skills. So can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've actually figured out how to balance, manage, integrate the two. So I've always had a very analytical brain. And even when I was a kid, I would take apart electronics and just kind of glue them back together or put them back together and get them working. And that was just a fascination of mine. And when I was a kid, I was also raised with an alcoholic parent. So I experienced a lot of abuse. And those kind of paralleled in my life, right? Like I had this track where I was a tech geek. I got involved in the 80s. I bought my first computer when no one really had them. I self-taught myself programming and learning systems and coding and all of that stuff. And at the same time, I had this survivor mentality and this, I suffered a lot of depression and suicidal thoughts throughout my lifetime. And so it was this dichotomy that I had the soft side of empathy with others. I was also a bully to others. And then at the same time, I had this tech career that was skyrocketing and no one knew any of it. Like no one knew my history because I was so ashamed of it. And so I managed to like grow the two. And eventually, in 2010, I went through my first divorce, which is funny to say my first divorce, but I went through my first divorce and I hit my mental health rock bottom. And at that point, I needed to focus on myself and my healing. And while I was doing that, over the years, I started to publish my book. And when that came out, I wanted to focus more on the healing part and doing coaching. But what I did was I took all the analytical stuff that I do for, building, technology systems. And I thought, well, I'm really good at that. How can I take that into mental health? So I developed a program where it's very analytical, very deep diving into solving your trauma issues and identifying patterns and behaviors and things that are kind of broken in you and healing those and then restarting over with a new foundation of strength and being able to move forward with that. So I kind of married the two somehow. And
Right.
and now I still do both, and I love both.
So I'm really interested because I know early on in my Air Force experience when I was learning to fly airplanes, they actually taught us to compartmentalize, where you put your baggage away because we're focusing on something very dangerous right now. And I think that was a good skill for flying an airplane. But I think a lot of us actually took that with us into our personal lives, and I don't know that is the greatest thing. So what I'm really interested in is there like a right and a wrong way to kind of approach your career success while you're trying to also balance your mental health?
Yeah, I would have to say that, because I did a lot of compartmentalizing, and that's something that's really not healthy, because you wind up being all work or all play or all depressed, or, all of, it's all or nothing. You wind up
Right.
living in extremes. Somebody said to me the other day, which I thought was it was integrating rather than balance. Because when you're
Right.
balancing, you're trying to juggle too much. But when you integrate, you create this flow in your life. And that's what I'm all about, is creating a flow in your life that works. So in the morning, I might be working on tech systems. And then in the afternoon, I'm working with coaching clients, and it's a natural flow. And in between, excuse me, I'm taking breaks, I'm going for walks, and nothing is rushed, right? Everything I do is focused strictly on the present moment, and it's all quality time. I'm no longer multitasking. It's a flow that creates this great, it is a balance, but you're not trying to balance. You're just kind of moving through life, and it's very fluid.
So you've got me thinking. So, I just published my own book and for my business, which is finance. But right now for my Air Force Reserve job, I'm going to be doing 3 months in Germany. So I'm kind of pulling my hair out going, whoo, two totally different directions to be pulled. And so I'm going to chew on this as we talk about this idea of integrating and flowing, because you don't want to like do one thing and then that has to stop and do the next thing. But yeah, I'm going to be interested to talk about that. And we talked about you share, how do you stop living on rote and experience life through those present moments? So can you just dig into that a little bit more? Like, what do you mean by that?
So think about, like, most people are looking for their sanity moments when they go to a yoga class, or they have a few minutes to meditate, or they go for a walk or a run or the gym, right?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
or going to the park and playing with your kids in the park, right? And we in those moments, we're enjoying that experience, right? And then we feel like we have to turn that feeling off and go through life. And you don't have to do that. So, like, a great example is, if I have 15 minutes before I have to start a client call, and in that 15 minutes, I really need to eat because I'm super hungry, I can go through that 15 minutes and rush, and be all chaotic. Oh, I have to make breakfast, or I don't have time to eat, I'm eating junk food and all, and be really kind of frazzled. Or I
It's
could
like
take
you're inside my head.
right. Or I could take that 15 minutes and bring that emotion of you being at the park with your kids and your friends, or you being at a yoga class. You can bring that emotion to that moment. So when you're in that moment, that 15 minutes feels like 30 or feels like an hour, because you're literally living, you're pouring the coffee, right? So you see a coffee commercial and it's like, oh, that looks so relaxing, right? Well, why can't you recreate that experience? So you make your coffee, you pour your coffee cup, but you're exploring or enjoying the experience of making coffee. Then you're making your breakfast, then you're eating your breakfast, and you're doing it with that emotion in that present moment. So your full experience is what you're doing, and you're enjoying it as if you're in that commercial, right? Or if you're in that, and you bring that emotion to that space. So that 15 minutes is a great experience rather than a rush and frazzled experience.
Okay, I love that, because I've just recently been learning, like, when you do your positive affirmation statements, that you can do it intellectually in your head, but when it becomes powerful is when you are feeling it. And I love your example of, like, think about like one of those commercials that you love, and the financial commercials are the best, right? It's always that couple walking on the beach.
Right.
Or playing with the family. So I love that. So So find that picture for you, whatever it is, so that you latch onto that feeling in the moment and not just like think about it intellectually. That's
Right,
really cool.
exactly.
That's a great example. So then how do you start to kind of transform your life with a new perspective?
So
Because it's
I
one
used
thing to say it, but how do you
Right,
do it?
right. It takes a lot of work and a lot of healing, but you have to be open. You have to be open to new experiences and new perspectives. So I used to be the type of person that I was so rushed and hurried. And, I grew up in New York City. So I'm always, by default, I'm on high speed, right? And I've had to learn
Right.
to
Oh
slow
yeah.
down. So I would literally, step on roses, drive to work an hour and have no idea what the weather was by the time I got there, because I was so in my head, right? I was so busy. And so I couldn't tell you if it rained or if it was sunny. And so now you have to look at life differently. When you slow down and everything is mindful, you're enjoying everything around you, but you have to look at it differently. So like you're looking at the roses, you're looking at the grass, you're looking at the sky, right? And it sounds like really like, I don't know, kind of cheesy, right? But you have to look at it differently. Like there's one example, trees don't actually drop leaves, right? They actually push trees. I learned this several years ago. So there's a process they go through, and the leaves don't just drop. The trees actually go through a process where they release a chemical and it pushes the leaf out. If you look really closely to a tree, you can see individual leaves shaking when there's no wind.
Mm-hmm.
And you see them shaking and shaking and shaking. And you can watch the same leaf for 3 days out your window, and then you'll notice one day it just drops. And so that's what I'm talking about. The world is full of wonder, of little things like that. And you just have to change your perspective. So that's the physical sense, right? But now from a personal sense, when you meet someone and maybe they trigger you or something, change your perspective. Maybe they're going through a hard time. Maybe they're struggling with something. Maybe you triggered them with something you said, right? And so everything you do, if you have a full awareness of who you are and where you're coming from and everything around you, then your whole world changes. And you literally, it's like you can see the cells in the world, and you can see the cells in people and their emotions and all of that. So it's having a heightened awareness of the people and the actions and the things they say, and your physical world around you. When you change your awareness of what it could be, right? And it's like a children's TV show, right? There's all this wonder. Kids look at the world so differently than we do. So it's like changing your perspective from a childlike view, but with the adult wisdom behind it. And now everything has wonder in it. Every person you meet is a beam of light with new experiences, and so much to offer this world, right? And so much to offer you in conversation. Every walk you take, you're noticing bugs, you're noticing leaves, you're noticing the bark, you're noticing the animals, right? Like there's so many things in this world that we just shut out, and we just have to be open to looking at things differently.
So I love that you're making me really think about like when I deal with my financial clients, that open-mindedness is such a key, because a lot of people kind of get trapped in their money, like their stovepipes or their financial baggage. And one of the things I like to do when people are open-minded is just kind of educate them, even with something as simple as like, how many jobs does your money have? And people are like, what do you mean? And so it's like this holistic approach and looking at it. And so I love that you brought that up. But I wondered if you could back up just a little bit. And you talked about being mindful. Can you explain, what does that mean to you when you use the word mindful or mindfulness?
So mindfulness to me is living every moment with intention. So when you have that awareness, right? You have this awareness, and then it takes a lot of work. Like people say, "Oh, I'm aware," but they're really not aware. When everything you say, everything you do, when you do it with intention. So like when we go back to the
Mm.
coffee example, right? I am making coffee. I am intentionally making coffee. I am intentionally not looking at my phone while I'm doing it. I'm intentionally focusing on this present moment, right? And I can do that with if I'm having lunch with you, right? I'm intentionally spending that time with you and focusing just on you and our interaction and the entire experience, almost as if I'm an observer, right? And when you do that from that perspective, when you work everything that you do with intention, you become very mindful. And so when you're working in mindful, you create that experience, that emotion behind it, where you're just kind of just, you feel good. Like everything just feels good. And so mindfulness is just paying attention to everything you do with with intent, with intention. Every word you say has intention. Every interaction you have has intention, and just be in that moment. Because a lot of people think mindfulness is maybe meditation or going for a walk. And yes, it's all of that. But when you live it every single day, and everything you do is with the goal of keeping that emotion. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but if you work towards keeping that emotion all the time, you embody it. It just becomes part of who you are, and your whole world literally changes by operating from that perspective.
So I like that. So you're taking it to another level because, I like Simon Sinek's Finding Your Why. And like I talk with my financial clients, like before we get into like the tools, like the stocks, bonds, mutual funds, I like to take a step back and go, why are you saving money? Why are you working? What is your purpose? And I like how you've defined mindfulness is having that intention. And I think that that's a great way to, like, whatever you're tackling in the moment, be intentional. Like, don't just be
Right.
going through the motions. I love that. So the next thing I wanted to ask you is, how do you honor yourself by living authentically? Because everybody talks about being authentic, and I think we would all agree, but how do you how do you discuss that?
So when I think about living authentically and honoring yourself, it's honoring who you are as a person, and that consists of multiple facets. So it's your imprint of what's been imprinted of you as a child, and then from that, what are your triggers and expectations that have come from that, and then out of that, what are the values behind that, and then how do you create boundaries to support and honor all of the above. So when you have an awareness of who you are, you're always honoring yourself. So a perfect example is when I was young, my parents were Sicilian immigrants, and my mom didn't work. She worked on and off. She was a cook in the kitchen, and she was a seamstress. And my dad controlled all the money. And so when I was, and she would like beg for money for food for the kids. There were four of us, right? And he was very frugal. And so, so when I grew up, I always thought I am never going to be dependent on a man ever. Right. So
Right.
being in IT, I worked hard. I was, moving up in my career, and my goal was always to be financially independent. So I made a lot of money in IT. I did. And my first marriage, it became a problem because there were other issues, obviously, but it was a problem because my husband was very he felt undermined because I made so much more money than him, and so it was a big problem, right? And he told me after we divorced, he was like, I was depressed, I felt inadequate, right? So like it was a big thing, and so and that led him to do drugs and have an affair, like it was a whole thing. So I walked away from that marriage. So I said to myself, I created boundaries for myself. And I said, I am never going to be dependent on someone else, right? This was my boundary from the beginning. And if I meet someone again, I'm going to keep our finances separate. So I did that. And several years later, I was healed and I married someone. Well, in the beginning, he moved in. I was like, I don't want any of your money. This is my house. I own it. I don't want nothing, because if it doesn't work out, you walk away and I take care of myself. I set a boundary for myself that I thought I was protecting me. What happened was we got married. My expectations changed. My triggers came out. Why aren't you supporting me? Why aren't you giving money? I wanted to slow down, right? Because I had to keep this lifestyle, not just for me, but for him and his kids. And, and I was like, wait a minute, like, what did I get myself into? So there were other things that I didn't know what my value was around money. I didn't know what my value was. He had a toxic relationship with his kids. I never set that. I didn't know what my value was behind that. So eventually I did end the marriage. What happened is I had to reevaluate, what are my values? My value around a relationship when it comes to money is, yes, I want to be financially independent, but I also want someone who is financially stable, who could support me should I need to not work, right? My
Mm-hmm.
value was to have a relationship with someone who has a healthy relationship with his kids, because that affected my mental health. So I went through it. I reevaluated my values and my boundaries. Once I did that, right, and my expectations, like I did a deep dive, my expectations, my boundaries, my values, and now I have what's a full awareness of who I am. And once I did all that work, and I have all of these exercises that I do with my clients now, and they absolutely love it. It changes the awareness of who they are, and then they honor themselves. So now every decision you make, because you're honoring yourself, you have no regrets, you have no guilt. Because think about it. If I asked you to take a rock and throw it through your neighbor's window, would you do it?
Of course not.
Right, right. And it's an easy no, right? If I said he stole your lawnmower and you want to take it back by throwing a rock through his window, would you do that?
No.
No. Some people would question, some people would say yes, right? But if you're at the point where you're questioning whether you should do something, it's because you don't know the value behind it and you don't know how
Right.
to answer. When you know your value, all of these things I call foundation of strength. When you know yourself so well that you honor every single one of your values, and that answer is a yes or a no without regret at all, without regret, without guilt, you honor yourself and everything falls into place going forward every single day. That's living with intention. That's living mindfully. That's honoring yourself authentically. Like, it all comes together, and your life completely changes.
And I'm interested in your process because I just got done spending a week with my extended family. And when you're living with people in one house, like we got one of those gigantic houses, like you don't know where some of your boundaries are until you find yourself bumping up against other people's boundaries.
Right.
So how do you guide people through that process? Like, you may not know that you have a line or a boundary there until you've bumped up against something in a different situation.
So when you bump into something, I have what's called understanding your expectations. And it's an exercise that it's 12 questions, and they go through, and it's like, what was the interaction? How did you react? How did it make you feel? Where do you think that expectation comes from? And that's the origin, goes back to your childhood always, right? The origin of,
Right.
because you have these hidden expectations. So I have them go through it. And then what would you have liked it to have looked like, right? What would the interaction, what would it have looked like had it been in your favor, right? And that sometimes you have
Mm-hmm.
to reevaluate. It may be your expectations were wrong, and you have to change
Right.
your expectations. Or maybe your expectations were right. And if it's right, then you create a value statement. I value my privacy. I value respect from my family members. And you have to say I value, because it's easy to remember. When you have a value
Mm-hmm.
statement, once you have that, then you create a boundary around it.
I
So
love that because,
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Well,
No,
once
I was just going to say, I love that because in my book, I just talk about emotion. Money is so much more emotion than math. And that
yeah,
was like a huge learning curve for me when I started, because I just thought it was about the numbers and getting my licensing. And I learned that's very little to do with it.
right.
It's all
It has
about the
very little to
baggage
do
that you
with it.
carry.
Right? I value
Like
making money, but I also value spending it. So that's my boundary that I haven't been able to stick to, right? Because
yeah,
I enjoy living life, right? So, but that's because I value enjoying life more than I value my
right.
bank account, which
Well, and I
now
think,
that I'm getting older, I need to start valuing my bank account.
well, but it's for most people, like money in and of itself it's neither here nor there. It's just the tool that allows us to facilitate experiences in life. And
Absolutely,
so
absolutely,
I think very few people care about like what the number is, but it's just the freedom and options that it gives you. So that
absolutely.
all those things flow together. So, if you had like one bonus concept that you would want to share with people, and then we'll get into how people can reach out and talk to you, but what would be like a bonus if someone walks away from this conversation? What do you want them to kind of know about you and what you do?
I would say find your everyday being. What's your everyday being? And that's the name of my company, Everyday Being, because that's what it's all about. How do you flow every day? And my flow is going to be different than yours, right? So I coach people to tap into who they are, to help them find what their flow is. And it's funny because my clients are like, I don't really understand that. I think I do. But then like 2 months into my program, they're like, oh my goodness, I found my everyday being and it feels so good because you're finding your flow. And again, it doesn't mean that life doesn't come at you and sometimes it knocks you down. But what do you do to get up, right? So know who you are. Figure out what that awareness is of who you are. Really tap into it and then live life in present moments and live it with wonder. There's so much beauty in this world, in people and in things and places, and just look at it differently. Change your everything that you know, just reprogram everything you know with an open mind and think of all the possibilities. You know, there's a lot of hope in that, right? Hope and wonder.
So I have to know, like, what inspired you to write a book after having a career in tech?
So I was always a bit of a creative. So my first book I tried to write was in 1985, and it was How to Build a Computer. And and I started writing that, and then I was like, yeah, it's just I started telling people about it, and nobody really knew about computers back then, and no one really cared. But I was writing an analogy of the computer versus buying a car, and I was trying to like relate that. So I tried writing several books, and then I always just stopped. And then this time, I just felt a passion to do it. And I don't know where it came from. I literally would wake up every night at 2, 3 a.m. and I couldn't get the ideas to stop. So I'd wake up and I'd go down and I would just write and write and write. And then the more I told people, the more they told me secrets about themselves. Like, I've lived a colorful life. I didn't have a lot of good experiences, even though my life is great on one hand. I was a bully. I did a lot of drugs and alcohol, and I was functioning. And, I went through infertility issues, and I've been through 2 divorces. Like, I've had so much come at me, but at the same time, people, when they heard my stories, they came to me and started telling me their secrets. And that's when I knew that the importance of telling my story. And when I started telling my story, I was like, I need to do something with this. And that's when I started writing workshops and courses and doing speaking engagements. And then I wrote my program, and it just kind of grew from there.
I love it. So Marisa, if people want to get a hold of you and look at doing your program or get a copy of your book, how do they do that? What's the best way to get in connection with you?
So you can email it mjones@myeverydaybeing.com, or you can go to my website, myeverydaybeing.com. I'm on LinkedIn. You can look at my program. It's on my website, but you can also look at IamAmindsetWarrior.com. And that's it.
I love it. So, we've covered so much ground today, but the things that I love is what you're talking about and how you help people with your program, like teaching people to be intentional and having that new perspective and being open-minded. It totally applies to everything that happens in finance. And like we talked about, money is just a tool that helps you have those experiences and those options. So what a really cool interview this has been. So tell us one more time. How does everybody reach out and get a hold of you?
It's my everyday being, BEING.com. And thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I'm still working on my money mindset, because that's one thing that I haven't really tapped into. But yeah, it's so important. So important. Just a final, my specialty in implementing global systems is financial systems. So I round to the nearest million. So it doesn't help me when I do my checkbook.
You got a little wiggle room in there.
Right, exactly. But thank you.
So,
it's been fun. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you everybody for listening in, and you'll have all that information out there so that you can reach out and contact Marisa. And then you can also, I would encourage everybody to get a copy of my book, Money Moves, at Amazon.com. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer it. So I'm really excited to hear about any ahas or insights people have. So as you watch today or you're watching this later on, make sure you put your comments in, because Marisa and I will be very interested. And don't forget that you can share this interview with any friends who weren't able to dial in today. And I look forward to sharing a must-know topic with you next time. Again, thanks, Marisa.
Thank you.